the more I've learned about the science of advocacy, the more it's changed my mind about whether I think it should be sharing stuff from the brand or enabling the advocates to be able to tell their own story. These neurons fire when someone else does something that we find interesting, but really fire when people talk about something passionately. It's based on that feeling that we get when we see someone else talk about something that they're passionate about, and you get a little bit excited about it yourself, right?
Hi, I'm Andrew Steele. Welcome to my podcast, How to Run a Happy Employee Advocacy Pilot. This podcast explores the best way for organisations to launch and sustain successful employee advocacy programmes. Now, building employee advocacy is often described as a complex and difficult task, and while there are many moving parts to coordinate, at its heart is a simple framework which puts employees at the centre. Now, this is what I define as happy employee advocacy. A programme which delivers results for the business by focusing first on what's in it for the employees. I'm delighted to welcome Vicki Saunders as my guest today. Vicki is founder of the EVP consultancy, having built her experience leading employer brand and EVP at major organisations including Currys, Boots and BAE Systems. Now, Vicki is extremely active on LinkedIn, which is where we met. Vicki, I've been following your content for quite a while now. You never fail to share something of real value and real interest. So welcome to the show, Vicki. It's
Thanks, Andrew.
fantastic to have you here today. So today we're going to be talking about how to use employee advocacy to attract the best talent. This is where Vicki is a real expert. So this is going to be a fantastic episode. So to kick off with the first question, I wanted to mention the post that was going around all the time last year about Cisco. Cisco announced in Fortune magazine that they were going to train all 84,000 employees to be LinkedIn talent influencers. They said the aim was to reduce the time to fill positions, and it really felt this was a major initiative which was signalling that this was embracing employee advocacy by a huge global company.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I mean, how do you see talent acquisition has changed over the last 5 years? Do you think employee advocacy is the answer now?
I think it's part of the mix, definitely. I think TA has changed from, I don't know, maybe not in the last 5 years, maybe in the last 10 years. It's become less transactional. I've seen in the companies that I've worked for, and really good recruiters and TA teams are really thinking about candidate experience and really building relationships with talent. So talent pooling obviously is part of that, and keeping candidates warm. But I think it's changed quite a lot, because I think expectations of what you want from an employer have changed quite a lot in that time as well.
That's interesting. So that's what I'm sort of seeing, is that there is that change in expectations on what you want from an employer.
Yeah.
I feel like people want to find places to work which match their values much more and
Yeah.
their purpose, I suppose. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I talk about it through referencing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure you know it, and I'm
Yeah.
sure most of the podcast listeners will have heard of it. But if we think about it, I think about it in quite a personal way, really. I think about it from the point of view of my parents when they were in the world of work in the 1970s. And really, EVP then, and what you could get from an employer was pretty much at the stuff right at the bottom of the pyramid, wasn't it? It was about getting paid, possibly getting some time off. There wasn't really all of the security benefits, which would be the next layer up around redundancy pay. Health and safety law didn't even come until 1974 in the UK. And I think over that time, we've seen EVP and what employers offer has gone right up to the top of the pyramid now. And certainly the younger the generation you are, the more you expect the stuff at the top of the pyramid. So absolutely, Gen Z candidates will be talking to recruiters and looking for information online about sustainability credentials, about what they're doing in the inclusion space, what's happening from a well-being point of view. It's all about that purpose stuff, not just the stuff at the bottom of the pyramid, certainly for the younger generations.
I agree, and it's interesting though because I remember when I applied for my first jobs, going back quite a while now, and kind of before or in the very early days of the internet, and I was always kind of desperate to know what it was like on the inside of a company, really. But it was really hard to find out anything in those
Mm,
days, was it? Whereas these
yeah.
days, it's so different now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the most common interview questions now, I believe. What's the culture like there? But often you don't necessarily believe what the recruiter's telling you when you ask that question. So you want to get a really good idea from the horse's mouth by finding out what other employees think.
I think that's the difference, isn't it?
Mm.
So in terms of a typical candidate journey, could you talk me through what are the kind of key steps in that, and potentially how employee advocacy could make a difference in that journey, where it could fit in the
Yeah,
mix?
sure. So I think actually it starts before they become a candidate, before they start actually thinking about applying for roles, etc., etc. I think it's way before that. It's when people are just thinking about where they work, their professional growth, what they want from their career, how that fits with their life. So it's when you're in that mindset of just thinking about the direction that you want to go with your work and your career, that then I suppose you think quite a lot about the environment that you want to be in, the kind of culture you want to work in. And I think I actually see advocacy as being one of the key ways to kind of bring an EVP to life, more so actually than an employer brand, because the EVP is the actual proposition. It's what you get in exchange for working in the organization. And so that's the bit that I think people are really interested in. What will it be like to work there? What will I get? And how will I feel? And will I fit in? And will I enjoy it? And will I thrive? It's all those kind of questions that I think people have got in their heads. So for me, it starts way back in the journey. And I think that's probably the most powerful place that advocacy plays a part with candidates before they even become candidates.
I love that perspective. I love the perspective about people asking, wanting to find out will they fit in, what it would be like there. That makes a lot of sense. In terms of the clients we've worked with, I agree. It's that early stage, and the team working there able to connect into their networks, I suppose, where
Yeah,
there are people who are potentially interested to share what it's like.
yeah, yeah.
So, in your experience, have candidates who come through places where you worked previously, have they indicated that other employees sharing social media has influenced their decision on where to apply? Is this
Mm.
happening in practice?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the place where I see it happening most is in the early career space. So definitely if you're helping out in the organization running an assessment center or anything like that, and you have some downtime talking to the candidates, absolutely they will be talking about what they saw other people post, not really so much what the business posted, but what they saw other people in the organization posted, and they go, oh, I saw this, and I saw this lady in France had just achieved this, or I heard about this new initiative you're doing from a community point of view, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. You know what I mean? It's those kind of things that people do talk about.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because those are the things that really bring it to life. Because that kind of
Mm,
leads me on to my next question. Really, is in an employee advocacy program, what's the best kind of content to share? Because is it these kind of brand created assets around the VP or the employer brand, or is it employees sharing in their own voices?
yeah, so that's $1 million question, isn't it? I think I'm probably a little bit controversial about this, in that I suppose no, that's not true. I think I've been on a journey with it. I think probably when I started out in employer branding and EVP 10 years ago at Boots, there was still quite a lot of nervousness about reputation risk. And that reputation risk, not even just being in the employer brand space, but also impact from a consumer brand point of view, even as far as shareholder impact, investor impact. Do you know what I mean? It's a big deal, really, about when you're sharing stuff about the organization. But over time, I think the world has moved on, and I think people are generally sharing more proactively about their lives. And the more I've learned about the science of advocacy, the more it's changed my mind about whether I think it should be sharing stuff from the brand or enabling the advocates to be able to tell their own story. Do you know much about the neuroscience? Shall I share a little bit of what I
No,
found out?
do
Yeah,
Please,
yeah,
please
yes.
do. That'd be
So,
helpful.
so fascinating. There's quite a lot of brain functions involved in advocacy that are to do with serotonin production and dopamine and all of those kinds of things. And yeah, five, six, seven different types of functions that are going on. The one that I found most fascinating was the discovery of these little things in our brains called mirror neurons. Now, they were discovered in the 1990s by a group of scientists in Parma University in Italy. They were doing some experiments on monkeys. So they were looking at monkeys' brains and trying to work out more about hand eye coordination in monkeys to see how that has evolved into the human or at what stage in the evolution process it's changed. So they had monkeys' brains wired up and they were, getting the monkey to grasp and then ungrasp certain items. So they were doing these experiments over time and all the rest of it. And then they noticed that actually, when a monkey still was wired up, but wasn't holding the item themselves, but were observing another monkey holding the item, the same parts of their brain fired. So they were still experiencing the same stuff in the brain as if they were taking the action themselves just by observing it in another monkey. Then they tested it with humans to see did that happen when the monkey observed a human do it, and it did. And so this caused the discovery of what they call now mirror neurons, and these neurons fire when someone else does something that we find interesting, but really fire when people talk about something passionately. It's based on that feeling that we get when we talk about see someone else talk about something that they're passionate about, and you get a little bit excited about it yourself, right? And it's
So
because of
true. So true.
it's because of empathy, and it wasn't until these mirror neurons were discovered that they've actually concluded now that empathy must have been a much further back part of human evolution than they originally thought. It had been considered to be quite a last few 100,000 years rather than further back than that. But empathy is really important because it's about surviving as a tribe. It's about being able to see when other people are hurt and need help. It's about being able to notice risks on behalf of a group and then protect the group. That empathy is part of human survival. And so they think the mirror neurons have developed as part of the empathy mechanism. And that's why advocacy works.
So that's absolutely fascinating. Thanks for sharing that Vicky. I'm gonna have to read up more about that now. It's so what you're saying is what people seeing other, so in this particular case, other employees sharing, talking passionately about where they work or their experience or their expertise, that's triggering these feelings in others who are listening in. That's what
Yep.
you're saying.
It's triggering a neurological response that then gives somebody a feeling that then connects with that person. So it makes something more believable. And so when I talk about my journey from being, probably a little risk averse when I first started out in employer branding to now knowing what I know about how advocacy works because of how the brain works, that takes me more towards a place of believing that, you know, um, uh, colleagues, employees blindly sharing what is coming from the brand, full stop, won't be as powerful as them talking about their own story. Do you know what I mean? Because it's when they talk about things which they're passionate about that's where that brain connection with the audience will fire and work.
But, I mean, it does make a complete sense, and because you are thinking about other people's posts I read when they're telling that personal story or that personal kind of adding that personal touch to it, it just makes such a difference, doesn't it? And I think
Yeah.
because because I can see your point. And I think it's a really valid point that there is concerns that about the risks and people saying the wrong thing or the brand not being represented correctly. I can understand that, but
Mm.
it's balancing that up, isn't it? And how, and I suppose it's taking it to the point where, so assuming taking on board what you're saying, that the best position is that employees are sharing in their own voices. How can we get them into a position which reduces the risks and they're supported, I guess, and
Yeah,
empowered
yeah, yeah.
to
Or
do.
there's a middle ground, I believe. So there's at the one end of the spectrum, there's blindly sharing assets that the brand have created for you, with little, extra embellishment from your own personal experience. At the other end of the spectrum, there's total EGC, employee generated content, which has virtually no input from the branding team, marketing team, whatever else. I think there's a middle ground, which I discovered when I was at Boots, actually, because we had a big organization, 60,000 employees, right?
Mm.
And we definitely saw spikes in our social media traffic, in reach, engagement, etc., around certain events in the year. And one of the biggest ones was around children in need. So Boots runs the biggest call center that takes the calls on the night of children in need on behalf of the BBC, right? So loads of people from support office at Boots go and volunteer to take the calls on the phones, and they're there till 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just a really nice big thing to do. Everyone's really passionate about children needs. It's been a long-term partner for Boots with the BBC. And we definitely see loads of traffic from employees coming out around that time. And so you could, on one level, go, right, that fits in a CSR bucket of content. Most of us have
Mm.
content strategies and we bucket things up and go, right, that's CSR, therefore we know CSR works. It isn't just that, though. So when I started looking at the peaks and troughs, and I was looking for other times in the year, there were some that I didn't really understand. And it wasn't until I looked at our engagement survey data and looked at the pride question. So, most of us have engagement surveys in our organisation that ask, do you agree, strongly disagree, up to strongly agree on various different questions, don't we? And it will
Yeah.
ask things like, I feel proud to work for Boots, strongly agree through to strongly disagree. And then there's the section underneath where the verbatim comments go. And that's where people say why they've answered in that way. And when I started analysing that, there were 20,000 verbatim comments for me to analyse, which was fun. Some really interesting things came out. So the kind of things people were saying that they were proud of were things like a number 7 advisors in store. Boots also has a relationship with Macmillan Cancer Care. And
Okay.
so one of the things they do through that, they do some work in pharmacy supporting patients, but they also support through number 7 counters. They support women who have been through chemotherapy and give them makeovers, advice on skincare,
Okay.
help them understand how to draw their eyebrows back in, that kind of thing. So, gosh, it makes the hairs on the back of my neck got on end already. That is the stuff
Mm.
that
That's
people were
amazing.
talking about in the answer to the pride question. What makes you proud? Do you know what I mean? I am
Yeah.
proud to work for Boots. And it was that kind of thing. And then that was a bit of a light bulb for me. I was kind of going, oh, right. What I actually need to do is find the sweet spot between the stuff we want to talk about that helps from an employer brand and an EVP point of view, with real examples of what's coming up in the answers to the pride questions. So you become more of a facilitator of the things that people are proud of, and you find the ones that align with. So for us, it was easy because Boots is all about care, you
Mm.
know? So actually, that was a beautiful example, real life, that people were proud of, that helped us tell the story of our culture being around care. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I kind of pivoted then from, some of the stuff that I was, developing from a content point of view and asking employees to share into actually aligning more around the stuff that they were proud of that fitted with the EVP and the strategic direction for our employer brand.
Brilliant, brilliant story. I think I've found this so often in my own experience, but I think the idea of actually, I know it kind of seems obvious, but going out and listening to the real voices of people, in this case, the colleagues, and how they feel, and then translating that into the actual stories you share as a brand. I think it's, I don't know, I've always found using their actual language just transforms the kind of post. I find it in marketing terms as
Yeah,
well. When you listen to customers and what their experiences are,
yeah, definitely,
it really changes it.
definitely, yeah.
So in terms of so one of the challenges for employee advocacy is that there are competing business needs. I mean,
Mm.
how do you feel an organisation should, if they have an employee advocacy program, how should they cope with different goals such as marketing, sales, as well as talent acquisition?
I I think if you stick with the stuff that people are proud of and passionate about, regardless of what bucket the content falls into or which strategy it's part of, then because people will still be proud, and this was certainly the case at Boots, they'll be proud of the products that we sell, the brands that the
Mm.
organization develops, and so that is the kind of thing that would certainly help from a marketing point of view, but it's doing more than one job. Do you know what I mean? So I would try and find commonality that's around pride and passion across all three areas.
I think that's a great perspective, and I think because I think it's if people can see people talking, as you say, it goes back to that passion point, doesn't it? Passionately
Mm.
about what they're doing and their work and their experience, and their expertise, and the products and so on. It that translates into wow, that looks like a great place to work, doesn't it? You can start
Yeah,
seeing the culture and kind of coming out of that.
yeah, absolutely.
But linked to that, I think that's a really good point. But how should that be owned within the business? Often when we work in employee advocacy, we're often approached initially by marketing teams, but
Mm.
it feels these days it's actually as if not more important for the employer brand and EVP.
Yeah, I've seen it sit in different places. I think it depends on the structure of the organization. I'm sorry, I don't want to dodge a question, but does depend because at Boots, yeah, there was bits in marketing, there was bits in employer branding, but actually when I worked in comms and PR for a while as well, and there was some work going on in that space. I think if there's collaboration, that's the key thing. I don't think you can give a hard and fast rule of where it should sit from a organizational design point of view.
I think that is a fair point. I think collaboration is key, isn't it? Because I
Yeah,
think however you look at it, it has to involve those different teams.
yeah, yeah.
So in terms of going back to the Cisco point I made at the beginning about they were looking to get all their employees involved. I mean, do you
Mm.
think it's right that companies should be aiming to get everyone sharing, or do you think there's a particular percentage, roughly, that you recommend?
Uh, by sharing, do you mean sharing the company assets or sharing their own stories?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Really,
Ah,
yeah. So sharing in some way, and I
mm.
guess going back to your previous answer, perhaps that's broken down into different types.
Yeah. I think I, d- I don't think they should be aiming to get everyone to share because people have to run towards it a little bit. You know what I mean? If
Mm.
it's going to be powerful for all the reasons we just talked about from a neuroscience point of view, then it has to come from the person's heart. It's about how they feel, but I think the organization should put the right tools and processes and enablement in place and almost set a tone of that it's okay. That there are so many organizations that are still kind of trying to recover from a world 15 years ago where there was like these really strict social media policies in place
Mm.
that were like straitjacketing employees on what they could say or not, and we all had to put those little disclaimers at the top of our Twitter feeds going, this is
Mhm.
my own opinion, da, da, da. People are still, I suppose, in a way recovering from that era. So I think the more that they can enable and put the right things in place, should people want them, the better. But I don't think it should be trying to get everyone to do it, you know?
Yeah, I'd agree. It feels it needs to be something that's voluntary and obviously and equally open to everyone. I guess for me, some organisations you hear about people very much saying we're going to get this team involved, we're going to find these people involved, and then it's not open to everyone. I feel it should be open to
Oh
everybody,
God,
but I
yeah.
suppose
Yeah. No, I've never been in a position where if people have come forward and said they want to be involved, then bring it on. Do you know what I mean? Usually it's more the opposite, that you're trying to find new people to join the movement, I suppose.
but that is always a challenge. And on that point, do you have any thoughts on how you motivate people to sign up to programs?
I think I think there's certainly a piece around. It's about understanding what's in it for different groups within your organization.
Mm.
So leaders will get something very different out of their LinkedIn activity specifically, and advocating in that space than someone who's in a frontline role. So one will have a massive impact from a personal brand point of view, from a networking. coming across as a thought leader in their space, as a senior person within their profession and industry. And do you know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
it's about understanding people's wants and needs. But I also think the more that the, let's say, movement, I suppose, can grow organically, the better. And the thing that I would encourage organizations to do, and that I've seen work really well, is to build out triplets. So when you have people, let's imagine you're setting up an employee advocacy program from scratch, and you might bring in 12 people. You might have gone to, usually the good places to turn are your early careers cohorts. So
Mm.
grads and apprentices, great. Also, people from your ERGs, your employee resource group. So people in the veterans group, the LGBTQ plus group, whatever groups you have in your organization, they're usually a great place. Another place is people on your employee forum, the people who represent the colleagues up into the leadership team and usually meet with them on a monthly basis. They're usually quite vocal as well. But when you found that original group of 12 or 15, 20, whatever it is, people that you've got, what actually I found quite nice to do is to ask each of them to find two people and to coach two people each. And you just and then another 3 months go by and you get those second cohort people to then do the same. And so that it grows out organically. And what that means is that there's less onus on it feeling like it's coming from the center or coming from head office, coming from leadership or coming from the top. And it feels more organic because you know what I mean, and it's more useful in some ways because people are sharing their own experiences with each other, coaching each other. Do you know what I mean? And it builds a community. And if it all just comes from the center, it doesn't build a community of ambassadors in the same way.
I think that's an absolutely brilliant idea. What a great idea. I think I find the idea of building a community, building a network of people who are learning and working together and sharing experiences. You're absolutely right. It's you don't necessarily want to hear from the kind of corporate centre, do you? You want to hear from people like you and how they're overcoming those challenges
Yeah,
or the barriers or whatever, the
yeah,
nervousness about doing it.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's still a role for the centre. I still think that there's a role for keeping the community updated on the latest changes in social, keeping them up to speed with trends, and making it feel like a bit like they're on an insider track of what's going on, and sharing top tips of, because it should be our job in the centre to understand how media trends are changing, how content is changing, how the algorithms are changing, and be able to distill some of that insight into practical things to be able to pass on to the community. So I still think that's the role, and we can certainly do stuff like doing personal branding workshops and
mm,
some of those kind of things. But I do think the community growth is, if possible, done best organically.
yeah. I think that's a brilliant idea. I shall be looking at that more. That's brilliant. So is employee advocacy, employees sharing content around what a great place it is to work and the EVP and the employer brand, is that a sustainable activity? Is that a sustainable message? I mean, how would you keep that message alive?
I think i think it is, if you think about it from the point of view that anybody's, I suppose, employee experience and employee life cycle is changing. It's about thinking about the moments that matter within that and helping people be inspired or enabled to tell stories around some of those moments as well. And also, I do think there's a great place to share with each other. The other thing that's nice to do from the centre is because you've got visibility across all of it, right?
Mm.
So let's say you've ended up with a cohort of 100 active ambassadors, which would be pretty massive, really. If you've got those, you've got visibility across all of them, and you can then kind of like shine a light on what's worked over here and shine it and share it with someone else, and then I think it then just grows and grows its own legs, I suppose, because you're helping people see different ideas, and it's almost limitless because it comes down to the creativity of what's in the human brain.
No, very true. And I suppose the point about the network as well, colleagues working together seeing what each other is sharing as well, and they're picking up ideas from each other as well as other ideas coming from the centre, like,
Mm.
and inspiring each other and things. Yeah, I agree. I think it's got that opportunity to, as you say, to be limitless. And I guess also if you're talking about the products and your expertise and or what you love about the products, things like that, there's always new opportunities to talk, isn't there?
I mean,
Which,
sometimes it's the most bizarre stuff, right? I remember years ago, oh, it was a cold day, and this is a Boots example as again, because Boots's head office is on the outskirts of Nottingham. So it's on an industrial estate. It's very beautiful. No, it's not really. But the grounds are quite nice and there are a lot of rabbits on the grounds. So
okay,
sometimes you're walking across to the car park, it's treading in some rabbit poo on the way, da, da, da. But it is
okay,
quite cute first thing in the morning, if you're walking into the office from the car park, and it can be a long walk because if you don't get there before 8:30, the car park's full and you have to end up parking on the other side of the site. And it's a
right.
20-minute walk from the other side. It's a big, 6,000 people work on that particular site. So it takes a long time. So you see a lot of wildlife as you go. And someone put a picture up of some of the rabbits bouncing around outside the office, and it went absolutely mad. I mean, hundreds of thousands of likes and engagement and everything else because of these rabbits on the Boots campus. It was crazy.
I was going to say, yeah, a rabbit story, a cat story, anything like that.
Anything like that. Yeah, totally.
People love it, don't they? It never fails to work. To work.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, brilliant story. Thanks, Vicky. So just to finish up, I suppose it's probably about a month ago now, but you posted, I think, off the back of the Ogilvy report, saying that employee advocacy was going to be the top influencer
Mm,
trend this year,
mm,
and you thought that this year is the year that employee advocacy could go mainstream.
mm.
Why do you think that, and what's changed? Do you think?
Um, Couple of mechanics at play. I think obviously we're in a recession now, officially. But before that, we know it's been a hard economic climate for a while. So in most organizations, budgets are either flat or have been cut. And so, people are needing to look for alternative ways to be able to activate the EVP and amplify the employer brand in a way that costs less. Now, advocacy isn't free because it does still cost time in the resource and energy of both, that team in the centre, but of all of your ambassadors out there as well. So that's certainly part of it. I think there's a pure cost part of it, but I also think that the way that the world is changing has been changing for a long time, but particularly in the last few years with the degree of uncertainty in the world, and certainly since the pandemic, there's quite a lot of change been happening at a societal level, globally and in different countries, around the dynamics of trust. Do you follow the Edelman Trust Barometer?
Yes, yep, yep.
Yeah.
No, that
So
one.
so so that last year saw a really massive shift away from trust being in media and government and local government and big organization, that kind of thing. And it's shifted, the dynamics all shifted much closer to home. People's trust has shifted more to my friends and family, my neighbors, small businesses in my community, my boss, my CEO. And so that means that when a brand is talking from the voice of the brand, and it's something we've seen for a while, there's data out there, isn't it, that says, if an employee, the impact that has from an authenticity point of view versus the brand speaking from themselves is 5 times greater or something like that. I can't remember the exact stat, but that trust dynamic is continuing to move closer to home, and more that people trust what other people say about things rather than what the voice of the brand says. And so to me, it's those kind of two mechanics that are going on. It's that, on a practical level, budgets are tight, and authenticity is super important right now. It's Merriam-Webster's dictionary word of the year last year. And that change in trust dynamics that we're seeing at societal level, I think that those things coming together into a bit of a perfect storm. Whether it'll actually be 2024 or whether it's something that we're going to see moving over the next few years, I mean, I wouldn't sign my name in blood about it, but I feel like the right things are, the climate is turning into the right place for advocacy to start really having its day.
No, I'd agree. Yeah, it feels it's all moving. All the pieces are coming together now, aren't they? And I
Yeah.
think it's interesting that the trust point, because obviously the Edelman Trust Barometer have been building towards this kind of point for a long time in a way, haven't they? It's always been more and more about you trust people, people like you, and obviously, like you say, it's your CEO rather than other CEOs.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. It's also the other thing I was reading the other day about people increasingly on social media going into smaller networks, dark social, or more on
Mm.
WhatsApp than perhaps things like that. Because again, it's people they're more familiar with and more connected to, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's how brands are often excluded from those networks. So it's how can they be part of those networks? Maybe that's an opportunity
Yeah.
again for
Yeah.
advocacy.
And we're looking for emotional connection, aren't we? It's the fallout of COVID, and that's why in-person events are, starting to come back up in a really big way, and people are joining communities left, right, and centre at the moment because it's about that connection.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant word to finish on there. So thank you so much for that, Vicky. It's been absolutely amazing. I've learned a whole new set of things I'm going to have to go and explore now around the neuroscience, particularly. I think that's really really interesting. So thank you so much for that.
No problem.
One last question: where can people find you?
Oh, so I'm on LinkedIn, Vicki Saunders, and you can see there that I am the founder of the EVP consultancy. So I help organizations develop their EVP in-house. So I coach, mentor, and helicopter in for the bits that are a little bit tricky for them. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Is there anything we can do to help you?
Yeah, just spread the word that I'm out there up for helping people with EVP. I'm also about to launch another business, which is around employer brand coaching. There's so many people in employer branding who are ex-TA and just would love a little bit of a hand in the employer branding world. So yeah, I'm going to be starting to do that soon too.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. Well, hopefully this podcast will
Thank you.
help promote that as well. So thank you again so much.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Andrew.
much for being on today, and
No
lovely to
problem.
see you. See you again soon.
Thank you.